This is my bench. And this is my bench, fully erect. In the fully erect state, my bench is big enough to allow me to use it as a router flattening sled. And that's what I intend to do in this video. Okay, enough with the erection jokes. But the extension that you see there, I made in a very recent video, link below, blah, blah, blah. The purpose of doing that was to get enough width to allow me to make a router flattening sled. I need a router flattening sled for the cookie that I need to flatten. You can just see the top of it there, so that I can make a coffee table that I promised to make for my dearest ma and papa. So, router flattening sleds, a plethora of them on YouTube, all over the web, various different styles and approaches, and the approach I'm going to use is this. So these are the rails that I'm going to use either side of the bench to run my centre rail on that's going to have the router in it. So if you're watching this video thinking to yourself, that's an amazing idea, I need to make one of those for myself and I really love the rails, then there's a couple of things you need to take into account before you launch out and spend your hard-earned cash. So here's the side rail, and here's the two sliders that are going to carry the cross rail. And here's the cross rail. And these two sliders on the cross rail are going to carry the router base, the router support frame that we'll get to in a sec. So this end bracket, this is the piece that you're going to bolt to this. Now, bolt, remove that word, affix to this, because this bracket isn't made to line up with these holes. As you can see, it don't not fit. So you're going to have to fabricate some kind of plate to go on these. Now, what I'm going to do is make an oversized plate that will sit level with the front and overhang the back. And the reason for that is that bolt, if that was mounted there, plus the width of this support runner to hold the router plate, is going to take 70 mil off of my width capacity for the runner, plus the other side 140 mil, which is going to have an impact for me, would mean my bench would not be wide enough for me to work on, flatten the cookie that I want to put on. So if I extend this plate so that that sits at the back and then the slider sits on that, I'm not going to lose anything from inside my capacity, my width. However, one other thing that you need to be aware of is the width of your router base. So mine's 180 mil, which means 90 mil to each side to center. So I'm potentially going to lose 60 mil from this side, bearing in mind, or take into account rather, the width of the flattening bit that you've decided to use. So the overall capacity of your bench, of the distance between your two outside rails, isn't going to be the capacity of the size of the slab that you can get in there or the cookie you can get in there. So make sure you take that into account in your calculations before you set to and start buying stuff, and make sure it'll actually do what you want it to. One other thing that I want to point out is length of the shaft of the bit that you decide to buy for flattening, coupled with the amount of travel amount of plunge you've got on your router, because you need to allow for the extra thickness of the plate of the router carriage that you're going to use. Now in my case, I've bought this wonderful chunky 12mm thick piece of acrylic, nice and clear, so that I can see through it and see what the bit's doing. But that's an extra 12mm of travel that I'm going to lose on the router. So they're not game stoppers by any stretch of the imagination, but they are points that I think you really need to be aware of and take into account when you're designing your perfect router flattening sled. So with that said and done, the first thing I'm going to do is lay out for these holes to fix this plate down to the runners on my side rails. I'm going to drill a slightly oversized hole, give myself a bit of clearance. These take an M6 bolt, so I'm going to drill an M7 hole, or an M7, a 7mm hole. So with that plate firmly bolted in place, I've just clamped my cross rail to the top of that just so I can check the clearance here, and that's fine. But by the time I put my admittedly oversized router plate on the bottom, that's not going to clear. So I need to raise these up by some 5 or 6mm by the look of it. So I've cut a little piece of oak that I'm going to rest on the edge. And then I can position my support bracket, clamp one side and drill the other. Going to use a nylon lock nut under these. So my next task is to secure the router support plate, in want of a better term, to these. But I just thought I'd get everything put together and that clamped on, as you can see, to make sure I've got superb motion. So that runs really nice. That runs really nice. Makes you want to sit on it and play for a quarter of an hour, doesn't it? So I'm going to take the same approach with this as I took with that. I'll take these off, mark that in the 4 corners, well, in those 2, measure that across, drill the holes slightly oversized so I've got a little bit of wiggle room, and then I can bolt this to the bottom, and then I need to bolt my router to the plate. So I'm all but there. I've got one last job to do, which is to deal with the height, because it just won't clear. So my approach to height adjustment is going to be, as pretty much everybody does, well, most people do, is to cut a little fillet that's going to go underneath the side rails and just prop it up a little bit based on whatever I'm working on. I don't envisage using this on a daily or even a weekly basis. So I'm hopeful that this will be a more than acceptable fix. If I can pick it up, there's a surprising amount of weight in that. And just drop that under there. So this is just a piece of off-cut pine or deal that I found, and I've sliced down to 6mm, which is, I think, all I need for this. I hope all I need for this. And that should give me just enough to clear the top of my cookie. So on my first run with this, when I do this, I'm just going to use clamps to keep these side rails in place and prove the whole theory. And when I'm happy with that, then I think I'll move to bolting or screwing the side rails down each time that I use it. So I know there's no chance of it moving at all. But that is absolutely superb. Couldn't be happier with it. So the last thing to do is to start flattening the cookie. But I'm going to leave that for the next video, which will be flattening the cookie, filling the voids, making the base, making the coffee table. I hope you'll join me for that. Thanks very much for watching, and see you next time. Ta-ra!